Hey guys, I'm the real Lynn, and this is Loungechair Reviews. Today we will be looking at Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. Snow Crash is a sci-fi novel that was written in the early 90s that has a lot to do with computers and is also very heavy-handed in philosophy. It's on the Time 100 books that you should read in your life list. I'm sure it's on a lot of other lists. I think it gets recommended a lot within philosophy and computer science circles. That's certainly the friends that I have that have read it. And before I get into the books, I want to give you guys some history of my own personal history with the books. I first learned about it when I was a freshman in college taking an Intro to Philosophy summer course. And my professor recommended it, and I loved my professor, and I loved everything about Intro to Philosophy. So I ran out to the library, and I read it, and it blew my mind. The philosophy discussed in it, the characters, the whole universe. I was not as much of a sci-fi and fantasy nerd. Well, I was a fantasy nerd. I wasn't as much of a sci-fi nerd yet. I didn't know about Tron and things like that, and that definitely bears a resemblance to Snow Crash in some ways. So when I decided to reread it, I was definitely expecting something different than what I got. That's going to color my review a bit, so I want you guys to take me with a grain of salt. So let's talk about Snow Crash. Snow Crash has two main protagonists that we jump between. A girl who's about 15 named YT, and it stands for yours truly, and Hero, who is the hero of the story, although I would argue that YT absolutely is instead. Along the way, you meet a motley assortment of characters, some who stick around for a while, some who don't. You have a definite villain. Actually, you have a couple villains. And along the way, you have a lot of conversations concerning religion, origins of speech, and how that works in civilization, and ultimately a lot of philosophy concerning all of this. There's also a lot of computer stuff in it. A major portion of the book is spent in what's known as the metaverse, and it's never quite clear if they're actually seeing themselves in there. It seems like they are, but other times it seems like they're just on their laptops. It's not important to the story. The story is about a new drug that's on the market, and the implications of it, what it does, how it works, how it's being distributed, who wants control of it, all the fun stuff that goes into a new street drug being introduced to the market. It was written in, I think, 1991, and given how different the internet is from how the late 80s, early 90s, or even 90s in general imagined the internet, it surprisingly doesn't feel too dated. It still feels like something that could exist in our world that would be really fun if it did. It's highly accessible the way the internet is. Overall, it's fast-paced. I read it pretty quickly. It's got two really engaging main characters, and like all action movies, it has a romance shoehorned in there. It actually has two romances shoehorned in there. The one romance is actually really funny and fun, and the other one kind of drives the plot towards the end, because the end definitely, I think, tries to resolve itself a little too neatly and tie up all loose ends, whereas I don't necessarily think it needed to, or maybe it should have cut some stuff out earlier in the novel. The main characters are pretty fun. The secondary characters are fun. It's a fun ride. It's definitely a novel that, when you don't take too seriously, is fun. And I think that maybe that's because it's written in a language we can understand. It's not removed from our culture the way older literature is. What's really fun is you can kind of dismiss all the heavy-handedness that's in it and read it for the sci-fi fun story that it is. Or you can think about the messages that it's giving you and decide for yourself how you feel. You might think it's a whole load of crap. Or you might just think that, like me, you don't need all the philosophy. This is one of those books where it's ultimately up to you what you want to take out of it. And I honestly think that that's one of the great things about literature. You can read this every 10 years and take something different out of it. Or you can just read it once. Ultimately, if you're into sci-fi, it's a fun read. It is a really great blend of action and thought. I personally still would recommend it, even though I'm not anywhere near as blown away by it as I was at 19. As usual, let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, have fun reading and support your local libraries, support your authors, support your bookshops. See you guys. There's honestly nothing I can expand upon spoiler-wise, so I'm not going to bother doing a spoiler section